Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading today from the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Leela, Chapter 1, The Spiritual Masters. Text number 56. Etavad eva jigyasyam tattva jigasunatmanaha anvaya vyatirekabhyam yatsyat sarvatra sarvada. Etavat, up to this, eva, certainly, jigyasyam, to be inquired about, tattva, of the absolute truth, jigasuna, by the student, atmanaha, of the self, anvaya, directly, vyatire kabhyam, and indirectly, yat, whatever, syat, it may be, sarvatra, everywhere, sarvada, always. Translation: a person interested in transcendental knowledge must therefore always directly and indirectly inquire about it to know the all-pervading truth. Purport: those who are serious about the knowledge of the transcendental world, which is far beyond the material cosmic creation, must approach a bona fide spiritual master to learn the science both directly and indirectly. One must learn both the means to approach the desired destination and the hindrances to such progress. The spiritual master knows how to regulate the habits of a neophyte disciple, and therefore a serious student must learn the science in all its aspects from him. There are different grades and standards of prosperity. The standard of comfort and happiness conceived by a common man engaged in material labour is the lowest grade of happiness, for it is in relationship with the body. The highest standard of such bodily comfort is achieved by a fruitive worker who by pious activities reaches the plane of heaven, or the kingdom of the creative gods with their delegated powers. But the conception of comfortable life in heaven is insignificant in comparison to the happiness enjoyed in the impersonal Brahman. And this Brahmananda, the spiritual bliss derived from impersonal Brahman, is like the water in the hoofprint of a calf compared to the ocean of love of Godhead. When one develops pure love for the Lord, he derives an ocean of transcendental happiness from the association of the personality of Godhead. To qualify oneself to reach this stage of life is the highest perfection. One should try to purchase a ticket to go back home, back to Godhead. The price of such a ticket is one's intense desire for it, which is not easily awakened, even if one continuously performs pious activities for thousands of lives. All mundane relationships are sure to be broken in the course of time, but once one establishes a relationship with the personality of Godhead in a particular rasa, it is never to be broken, even after the annihilation of the material world. One should understand through the transparent medium of the spiritual master that the Supreme Lord exists everywhere in his transcendental spiritual nature, and that the living entities' relationships with the Lord are directly and indirectly existing everywhere, even in this material world. In the spiritual world there are 5 kinds of relationships with the Lord: Shanta, Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, and Madhurya. The perverted reflections of these rasas are found in the material world. Land, home, furniture, and other inert material objects are related in Shanta, or the neutral and silent sense, whereas servants work in the Dasya relationship. The reciprocation between friends is called Sakya. The affection of a parent for a child is known as Vatsalya, and the affairs of conjugal love constitute Madhurya. These 5 relationships in the material world are distorted reflections of the original pure sentiments, which should be understood and perfected in relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master. In the material world, the perverted rasas bring frustration. If these rasas are re-established with Lord Krishna, the result is eternal, blissful life. From this and the preceding 3 verses of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which have been selected from Srimad Bhagavatam, the missionary activities of Lord Chaitanya can be understood. Srimad Bhagavatam has 18,000 verses, which are summarized in the 4 verses, beginning with Aham Evasam Evagre, 53, and concluding with Yat Syat Sarvatra Sarvada, 56. In the first of these verses, 53, the transcendental nature of Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is explained. The second verse, 54, further explains that the Lord is detached from the workings of the material energy, Maya. The living entities, although parts and parcels of Lord Krishna, are prone to be controlled by the external energy. Therefore, although they are spiritual, in the material world they are encased in bodies of material energy. The eternal relationship of the living entities with the Supreme Lord is explained in that verse. The next verse, 55, instructs that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by his inconceivable energies, is simultaneously one with and different from the living entities and the material energy. This knowledge is called Achintya Bheda Tattva. When an individual living entity surrenders to the Supreme Lord Krishna, he can then develop natural transcendental love for him. This surrendering process should be the primary concern of a human being. In the next verse, 56, it is said that a conditioned soul must ultimately approach a bona fide spiritual master to try to understand perfectly the material and spiritual worlds in his own existential position. Here the words Anvaya Vyatire Kabhyam directly and indirectly suggest that one must learn the process of devotional service in its 2 aspects. One must directly execute the process of devotional service and indirectly avoid the impediments to their process. Om Agana Timirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militam Yena Tasma Shigurve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivashadi Gaura Bhakta-vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Translation again. A person interested in transcendental knowledge must therefore always directly and indirectly inquire about it to know the all-pervading truth. In the last class we heard about the Bhagavatam's confidential essence, Prema Bhakti, which is explained in that 3rd of the 4 original Bhagavatam verses, as Prabhupada explained in the purport today. And naturally, after hearing about that Rahasya, that confidential essence of all knowledge, a sincere person asks, how do I attain that? How do I attain that highest goal, that most confidential essence of all wisdom? Today's verse answers that question. As Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport, it is said that a conditioned soul must ultimately approach a bona fide spiritual master and try to understand perfectly the material and spiritual worlds and his own existential position. Here the words Anvaya Vyatire Kabhyam, directly and indirectly, suggest that one must learn the process of devotional service in its 2 aspects. One must directly execute the process of devotional service and indirectly avoid the impediments to the process. So what this verse and Srila Prabhupada is explaining is the process of sadhana bhakti, devotional service and practice. So that is the way to attain the Rahasya, the Bhagavatam's confidential essence of Prema Bhakti. So we'll have a look at that process today, particularly through the conversation between Lord Chaitanya and Sanatana Goswami recorded in the 22nd chapter of the Madhya Lila of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. That chapter is called The Process of Devotional Service. At the beginning of that conversation, Lord Chaitanya says, "My dear Sanatan, please now hear about the regulative principles for the execution of devotional service. By this process, one can attain the highest perfection of love of Godhead, which is the most desirable treasure." So if we go to text 105 of the 22nd chapter, that's the following verse. Lord Chaitanya quotes a verse which is also found in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Kriti sadhya bhavet sadhya bhava sa saranabhida nitya siddhasya bhavasya prakatyam pradisadhyata. When transcendental devotional service by which love for Krishna is attained is executed by the senses, it is called sadhana bhakti, or the regulative discharge of devotional service. Such devotion eternally exists within the heart of every living entity. The awakening of this eternal devotion is the potentiality of devotional service and practice. In the purport to this verse, Srila Prabhupada says, this verse is found in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 122. Because living entities are minute atomic parts and parcels of the Lord, devotional service is already present within them in a dormant condition. Devotional service begins with Shravanam Kirtanam, hearing and chanting. When a man is sleeping, he can be awakened by sound vibration. Therefore, every conditioned soul should be given the chance to hear the Hare Krishna mantra chanted by a pure Vaishnava. One who hears the Hare Krishna mantra thus vibrated is awakened to spiritual consciousness or Krishna consciousness. In this way, one's mind gradually becomes purified, as stated by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Chaitodharpana Marjanam. When the mind is purified, the senses are also purified. Instead of using the senses for sense gratification, the awakened devotee employs the senses in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. This is the process by which dormant love for Krishna is awakened. So we have a nice, concise definition of sadhana bhakti. It's an execution of devotional service performed with the senses, which has the potentiality to awaken the eternal but dormant love for Krishna, which is in the heart of every living entity. In the next verse, Lord Chaitanya says, the spiritual activities of hearing, chanting, remembering, and so forth are the natural characteristics of devotional service. The marginal characteristic is that it awakens pure love for Krishna. So hearing and chanting and remembering, they are the natural characteristics of devotional service, and the effect of that devotional service is this marginal effect in that one's love for Krishna is awakened. And then Lord Chaitanya quotes the famous verse, Nitya Siddha Krishna Prem Shadya Kabunai Shravanadi Shuddha Chitte Korye Udoy. Pure love for Krishna is eternally established in the hearts of the living entities. It is not something to be gained from another source. When the heart is purified by hearing and chanting, this love naturally awakens. So this is important to understand, that the activities of devotional service are the natural function of the living entity. And although in the material world the senses are being misused in sense gratification, the senses have their proper use in the service of Krishna. And so if we can transfer our sense activities from sense gratification to devotional service, or the service of Krishna, then that pure love for Krishna, which is established in our hearts, will be awakened, because the heart will be purified. So this is a very natural process. That is the point. It may seem in the beginning to be somewhat unnatural, because the soul is conditioned, and that means that he's become habituated to an unnatural state of trying to gratify his own senses. So if you do something long enough, even if it's something which is unnatural, then you'll just start considering it to be natural. Take ordinary vices of Kali Yuga. Let's just take cigarette smoking, for example. When people, if they start cigarette smoking, it's not natural, and it tastes bad, you cough. But if you keep on doing it, then you get used to it, and actually you think you can't live without it. It becomes such a apparently natural behavior or activity or habit. And to get free from that habit, even though it's extremely unnatural, is very difficult. So it takes a lot of determination to form a new habit, to get back to your original state where you weren't smoking. Because you've accepted that unnatural behavior as natural just by doing it a lot. So it's the same with material life in general. Because we've done it a lot, we think it's natural. And therefore when we take to the process of sadhana bhakti at the beginning, particularly at the beginning of the process, then we can have that misconception that, oh, this is hard, this is unnatural, I'm struggling, I'm trying to force myself to do something I don't want to do. Yeah. But you could have the same reaction when you, if you did, started cigarette smoking. You could, but you kept on doing it, and then it became natural even though it was unnatural. So devotional service is natural, but because we've become habituated to an unnatural condition, then we can, particularly at the beginning, consider that it's something unnatural. So the point Lord Chaitanya is making here is that pure love for Krishna is eternally established in the heart, and it's not something to be gained from another source. It's not an external imposition. We're not trying to just artificially imagine that actually I'm not the body and I'm not the enjoyer and the controller. Actually I'm Krishna's eternal servant. We're not just imagining these things and trying to just kind of drill it into our brain that, you know, this is the ultimate reality. No, these are natural things. We've just come under the influence of forgetfulness, and in that forgetfulness developed a habit of sense gratification. So sense gratification feels natural, and devotional service feels unnatural. However, if we take to the process with great sincerity and determination, then through that, particularly through the processes of hearing and chanting, then the heart will be purified, and that natural love for Krishna will awaken. That is the point here. Now, there are two types of sadhana bhakti, Lord Chaitanya goes on to explain. He says there are two processes of practical devotional service. One is regulative devotional service and the other is spontaneous devotional service. And he says, those who have not attained the platform of spontaneous attachment in devotional service render devotional service under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, according to the regulative principles mentioned in the revealed scriptures. According to the revealed scriptures, this kind of devotional service is called Vaidhi Bhakti. So that's the first of the two processes of sadhana. Vaidhi. There's Vaidhi sadhana, in which you don't have any spontaneous attachment to devotional service, and therefore your impetus for that service, rather than being a natural attraction, is the instruction of the spiritual master and the instruction of the scriptures. So we can read a little bit more about that later. But basically it means that it's like you're a sick patient and you want to get well, but you don't have any spontaneous attraction to taking the medicine. Because to you the medicine tastes bitter. It's like Rupa Goswami's example of Vaidhi Bhakti given in the Nectar of Instruction. When someone has hepatitis, they taste sugar to be very bitter because they've got a disease that problems with the liver, and it makes the sweetest thing, rock candy, taste horribly bitter. So they're in an unnatural diseased condition, therefore they don't get the natural effect of eating sugar. So he explains, but the cure for hepatitis is sugar. So although the sugar tastes bitter to you because of the disease, if you want to get cured, you take it anyway. And then by taking it according to the doctor's instruction, almost apparently miraculously, you start getting cured from the disease of hepatitis or jaundice, and your original taste for sugar, the sweet taste, is revived. So this is his example of Vaidhi Bhakti, where you don't have a natural taste necessarily for the processes of hearing and chanting, but you're doing it because you understand that you're diseased, in a diseased condition, being a conditioned soul, and because the spiritual master and the scriptures tell you that this is the cure. So because you have faith in that, you take the medicine, and this way you gradually get over your disease of sense gratification. So Lord Chaitanya then quotes a verse from the Bhagavatam, famous verse from the second canto, which illustrates this process of Vaidhi Bhakti. He says, he quotes, this is Shukadeva Goswami speaking, O descendant of Bharata, O Maharaja Parikshit, the Supreme Personality of Godhead who is situated in everyone's heart is Paramatma, who is the Supreme Controller and who always removes the miseries of the living entities, must always be heard about from reliable sources. He must be glorified and remembered by one who wishes to become fearless. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, this is a quotation from Srimad Bhagavatam 2.1.5. It is one's duty to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the hearing process. This is called Shrotavya. If one has heard properly about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his duty is to glorify the Lord and preach His glories. This is called Kirtitavya. When one hears about the Lord and glorifies Him, it is natural to think of Him. This is called Smartavya. All this must be carried out if one actually wants to be immune from fear. So this is Lord Chaitanya's explanation then of Vaidhi Bhakti, the first of the two processes of sadhana, devotional service and practice. And a little later I'll just mention the other aspect, Raganuga. But now Lord Chaitanya goes on to the goal of sadhana bhakti. Quotes a famous verse from the Padma Purana. Smatavya satatam Vishnu vishmatavyo no jatu chit save vidi nashedasyo etayo eva kinkaraha. Krishna is the origin of Lord Vishnu. He should always be remembered and never forgotten at any time. All the rules and prohibitions mentioned in the Shastras should be the servants of these two principles. So this is what we're trying to achieve then in, you could say, more practical terms, or a slightly more detailed, with a slightly more detailed understanding. In a general sense, sadhana bhakti then awakens that dormant love for Krishna. But that dormant love for Krishna is symptomized by the symptoms mentioned in this verse, that one always remembers Krishna and never forgets Krishna. So this is the goal then of sadhana bhakti. In other words, the goal is to revive our love for Krishna, which will be symptomized by always remembering Krishna and never forgetting him. And you may remember in the last class we talked about how that is the symptom of someone who possesses the rahasya, right? The confidential essence of the Bhagavatam is that they only see Krishna within and without. So that is the that is the goal then of our spiritual practices, to come to that point. And this verse says all the rules and regulations mentioned in the Shastras should be the servants of these two principles. So how do you understand the ultimate purpose of whatever rule or regulation you're following? It has to be something that either empowers you to remember Krishna, that's the positive, or it has to be something that prevents you from forgetting Krishna, that's the negative. Remember in today's verse, Anvaya Vyatirekabhyam. So Anvaya means directly, and Vyatirekabhyam means indirectly. So in this verse, Krishna is saying to Lord Brahma, a person interested in transcendental knowledge must therefore always directly and indirectly inquire about it to know the all-pervading truth. So directly means understanding what should be done. So that's what a rule is. A rule is something that should be done. You should do this. And then Vyatirekabhyam, indirectly, understanding the truth indirectly, means understanding what shouldn't be done. Right? That's a prohibition. Prohibitions are things that shouldn't be done. So in that verse they're called Vidi and Nisheda. Vidi is a rule, Nisheda is a prohibition. Right? In the Bhagavatam it's called Anvaya, the positive, Vyatirekabhyam, the negative, or directly and indirectly. So this point is just being made again and again, that the process of sadhana bhakti is simultaneously a positive and negative process. As we mentioned in the last class, if we simply focus on the positive, or maybe it wasn't the last class, it was a previous class that we gave recently, that if we simply focus on the positive, say the rules, chanting, hearing, remembering, without taking into account the negative, the prohibitions, then we'll basically become sahajas, people that they practice devotional service, but they also practice a lot of things that have nothing to do with devotional service, and therefore their devotional service is not pure. And does not lead to the ultimate goal of always remembering Krishna and never forgetting him. And then if we go the other way and we just follow all the prohibitions but don't follow any rules, we just avoid this and avoid that and don't do this and don't do that, then we become impersonalists. And that also doesn't lead to the goal of always remembering Krishna and never forgetting him. So both rules and prohibitions have to be followed, and that's why we see that in the next section. We'll see how, if we look at the items, the 64 items of sadhana bhakti that Rupa Goswami has given, then they are, particularly the first 20 items, they're divided up into positive and negative things. This is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do. It's very practical, actually, if you think about it. It's sometimes we get a bit of an attitude about, but I can't do this and I can't do that, and what's wrong with a little bit of this and what's wrong with a little bit of that. But if you think about it practically, that's just not how life works. Even what we call life, it doesn't work like that. Let's say you want to do just any practical thing. There's things you have to do to get it done, to get a result, and there's things that you can't do if you want to get a result. Let's just take a simple thing like lighting a fire. If you want to light a fire, you've obviously got to have some positive things there. There's some things you have to do. You have to have some firewood. You generally would have to have some paper. You would have to cut the firewood up into kindling so that it's small enough to catch fire from the paper. You would have to actually have another source of fire, unless you were a brahmana from a previous age and you could light the wood by mantra. You would have to have a lighter or some matches. You would actually have to strike the match against the box of the matches. You would have to put the match in the right place in the paper, and you would have to structure the kindling over the paper in a certain way. You can't just chuck a whole lot of wood on top of the paper, it's not going to work. You have to structure it. There has to be air in between the paper and the wood. It has to be spread in a certain way so that the air can push the fire up into the wood. There's so many things you have to do. And then there's things that you can't do as well. You can't tip water on the fire. You can't have wet wood. You can't be out in a very windy place and try and light a fire. It's not going to work. So just any practical thing, you can take anything in your life and you can see that if you actually want to get a result, there are positive things you just have to do and there are negative things that you just can't do. So Bhakti Yoga is also a very practical process. That's one reason that Prabhupada calls it a science, because it's just very practical. Just like in science, if you go to a laboratory at the university or somewhere, a science lab or something, and you want to get a certain result from an experiment, the scientist or the lecturer or whoever's there as the authority, they'll tell you that if you want to get the same result that other people have got from this experiment, you have to do it this way, and you can't do it that way. So that's what Prabhupada means when he says that Bhakti Yoga is a science. You just have to do it a certain way, and you can't do it another way if you want to get the actual result. And the result we're hearing about here is to always remember Krishna and never forget him in any time. So let's have a look at the purport. Prabhupada says that this verse is a quotation from the Padma Purana. There are many regulative principles in the Shastras and directions given by the spiritual master. These regulative principles should act as servants of the basic principle. That is, one should always remember Krishna and never forget him. This is actually a good practical point to remember if you're trying to make decisions as a bhakti practitioner. Is my idea or my plan going to help me remember Krishna more? Is it going to prevent me from forgetting Krishna or not? A very helpful rule of thumb, so to speak. Prabhupada goes on, this is possible when one chants the Hare Krishna mantra. Right? Therefore, one must strictly chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra 24 hours a day. Is everybody doing that? 24 hours daily, he says. So if you chant 24 hours daily, then you'll always be able to remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. Right? Like Lord Chaitanya said, Kirtaniya Sada Hari. One may have other duties to perform under the direction of the spiritual master, but he must first abide by the spiritual master's order to chant a certain number of rounds. In our Krishna consciousness movement, we have recommended that the neophyte chant at least 16 rounds. This chanting of 16 rounds is absolutely necessary if one wants to remember Krishna and not forget him. Of all the regulative principles, the spiritual master's order to chant at least 16 rounds is most essential. So if you want to know what the most important item of sadhana is, there you have it. Of all the regulative principles, the spiritual master's order to chant at least 16 rounds is most essential. And now Prabhupada goes and comments on to comment about other aspects of devotional service. He says one may sell books or enlist life members or render some other service, but these duties are not ordinary duties. These duties serve as an impetus for remembering Krishna. When one goes with a Sankirtan party or sells books, he naturally remembers that he's going to sell Krishna's books. In this way, he's remembering Krishna. Was everybody doing that when they were selling books? Remembering that these are Krishna's books? That's what you're supposed to do. When one goes to enlist a life member, he talks about Krishna and thereby remembers him. Smartavya satatam vishnur vismatavyo najatuchit. The conclusion is that one must act in such a way that he will always remember Krishna, and one must refrain from doing things that make him forget Krishna. These two principles form the basic background of Krishna consciousness. Now Lord Chaitanya goes on to explain some of the 64 items of sadhana bhakti. First 10, you'll notice, are positive or direct, and then the second 10 are negative or indirect. He says, I shall say something about the various practices of devotional service, which is explained in so many ways. I wish to speak briefly of the essential practices. On the path of regulative devotional service, one must observe the following items. 1. One must accept a bona fide spiritual master. 2. One must accept initiation from him. 3. One must serve him. 4. One must receive instructions from the spiritual master and make inquiries in order to learn devotional service. 5. One must follow in the footsteps of the previous acharyas and follow the directions given by the spiritual master. 6. One should be prepared to give up everything for Krishna's satisfaction, and one should also accept everything for Krishna's satisfaction. 7. One must live in a place where Krishna is present, a city like Vrindavan or Mathura or a Krishna temple. 8. One should acquire a livelihood that is just sufficient to keep body and soul together. 9. One must fast on the Ekadasi day. 10. One should worship Datri trees, banyan trees, cows, brahmanas, and devotees of Lord Vishnu. Right, so that's the first 10, all positive. And as we heard Prabhupada say in today's purport about 4 or 5 times, the most important aspects there are the first 5 about the relationship with the spiritual master, because he's going to teach then the disciple how to apply these other practices. Remember, Prabhupada said in today's purport, those who are serious about the knowledge of the transcendental world, which is far beyond the material cosmic creation, must approach a bona fide spiritual master to learn the science, both directly and indirectly. One must learn both the means to approach the desired destination and the hindrances to such progress. The spiritual master knows how to regulate the habits of a neophyte disciple. Therefore, a serious student must learn the science in all its aspects from him. Then we go on to the next 10, which are indirect, or their prohibitions. 11. One should avoid offences against devotional service and the holy name. 12. One should give up the company of non-devotees. 13. One should not accept an unlimited number of disciples. Anyone there doing that? Can we watch out for that one? Accepting an unlimited number of disciples. 14. One should not partially study many scriptures just to be able to give references and expand explanations. 15. The devotee should treat loss and gain equally. 16. The devotee should not be overwhelmed by lamentation. Sometimes we see that devotees get overwhelmed by lamentation. 17. The devotee should not worship demigods, nor should he disrespect them. Similarly, the devotee should not study or criticize other scriptures. 18. The devotee should not hear Lord Vishnu or his devotees blasphemed. 19. The devotee should avoid reading or hearing newspapers or mundane books that contain stories of love affairs between men and women or subjects palatable to the senses. That also includes the internet. It's just that when Prabhupada wrote this, there was no internet. 20. Neither by mind nor words should the devotee cause anxiety to any living entity, regardless how insignificant he may be. So there you go. The first 10 items of sadhana bhakti then are the positives, the direct, the rules, and then the second 10 are the negative, the indirect, the prohibitions. Of course, there's 64 items, but these are the first 20 that Lord Chaitanya explained to Sanatana Goswami. Now, coming back to this point of the relationship between the spiritual master and disciple, we can understand from Rupa Goswami in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu that really sadhana bhakti begins with initiation. And Prabhupada says it many times in the purport today. One must accept a bona fide spiritual master. So at the time of initiation, then when one formally accepts a spiritual master, then technically speaking that's when sadhana bhakti begins. So that stage of the process is called bhajana kriya. And sadhana bhakti goes from bhajana kriya up to the platform of asakti, or attachment, which is just before the liberated platform. The next stage from asakti is bhava, so that's devotional service on the liberated platform, and then finally prem, the full manifestation of bhava. So in relation to this this point about the spiritual master and accepting a spiritual master, in the Nectar of Devotion, Srila Prabhupada says, every living entity under the spell of the material energy is held to be in an abnormal condition of madness. In Srimad Bhagavatam it is said, generally the conditioned soul is mad, because he is always engaged in activities that are the causes of bondage and suffering. So we would, if we see somebody who repeatedly causes themselves suffering, we would consider them mad, just in the ordinary sense, wouldn't we? Someone just repeatedly, even against all good advice, just keeps doing some horrible activity. They're addicted to some kind of horrible activities that just cause them so much suffering. We'd think they're mad. Well, in the existential sense, basically everything we do in this world, separate from Bhakti Yoga, is causing us suffering. We just don't know it. Or even if we do know it, we're not 100% convinced. So we keep on doing it. Yes, whatever we do outside of Bhakti Yoga is just a catalyst to repeated birth and death. Prabhupada goes on, the spirit soul in his original condition is joyful, blissful, eternal, and full of knowledge. Only by his implication in material activities has he become miserable, temporary, and full of ignorance. This is due to vikarma. Vikarma means actions which should not be done. Therefore we must practice sadhana bhakti, which means to offer mangalarti, deity worship in the morning, to refrain from certain material activities, to offer obeisances to the spiritual master, and to follow many other rules and regulations that will be discussed here one after another. These practices will help one become cured of madness. As a man's mental disease is cured by the directions of a psychiatrist, so this sadhana bhakti cures the conditioned soul of his madness under the spell of Maya, material illusion. And then Prabhupada goes on to explain more specifically about the role of the spiritual master. He says, Narada Muni mentions this sadhana bhakti in Srimad Bhagavatam, 7th canto, 1st chapter, verse 32. He says there to King Yudhisthira, my dear king, one has to fix his mind on Krishna by any means. That is called Krishna consciousness. It is the duty of the Acharya, the spiritual master, to find the ways and means for his disciple to fix his mind on Krishna. That is the beginning of sadhana bhakti. Right, so this is the service then of the spiritual master to the disciple, to find out the ways and means that the disciple can actually always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. So this is why it's the essential item, because one cannot understand that oneself. One needs that guidance. As Krishna says, Tadviti pranipatina pariprashnena sevaya uparikshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshanaha. Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master, inquire from him submissively, and render service unto him. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they've seen the truth. So what is that knowledge? That knowledge is how to fix the mind on Krishna. And again, the most important item of sadhana bhakti, Srila Prabhupada explains. This is again from that same section of Nectar of Devotion, chapter 2. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given us an authorized program for this purpose, meaning the purpose of fixing the mind on Krishna, centered around the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. This chanting has so much power that it immediately attaches one to Krishna. This is the beginning of sadhana bhakti. So therefore at initiation, the disciple promises to accept the direct method of chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, minimum of 16 rounds a day, and trying sincerely to give up the offences in chanting. You could say that's a negative aspect of that. So the positive is to chant at least 16 rounds a day. Negative is to avoid the offences in chanting. And then the disciple also promises to follow the 4 regulative principles, and those are prohibitions, things you shouldn't do. Alright, so in this way one can one will be attached to Krishna, one's mind will become attached to Krishna. And Prabhupada says that is the beginning of sadhana bhakti. Now, as we said, the sadhana bhakti has 2 aspects, or Lord Chaitanya explained that to Sanatana Goswami, Vaidhi and Raganuga. So they're both aspects of sadhana. Prabhupada explains also in the Nectar of Devotion about the differences between them. He says, now the sadhana bhakti, or practice of devotional service, may also be divided into 2 parts. The first part is called service according to regulative principles. One has to follow these different regulative principles by the order of the spiritual master or on the strength of authoritative scriptures, and there can be no question of refusal. That is called Vaidhi, or regulated. One has to do it without argument. So we already discussed that a little bit. The impetus for devotional service for someone who does not have spontaneous attraction to it, raga, is the order of the spiritual master and the scriptures. Prabhupada goes on, another part of sadhana bhakti is called Raganuga. Raganuga refers to the point at which, by following the regulative principles, one becomes a little more attached to Krishna and executes devotional service out of natural love. So then the impetus for someone's service who's on this platform of Raganuga sadhana is then a natural attraction for devotional service. Prabhupada says they become a little more attached to Krishna. Right? So this is not the liberated platform. This is within the realm of the conditioned practitioner, but because the practitioner is a little more attached to Krishna, then they perform their devotional service out of natural love. And he gives an example. For example, a person engaged in devotional service may be ordered to rise early in the morning and offer arati, which is a form of deity worship. In the beginning, by the order of his spiritual master, one rises early in the morning and offers arati, but then he develops real attachment. When he gets this attachment, he automatically tries to decorate the deity and prepare different kinds of dresses and thinks of different plans to execute his devotional service nicely. Although it is within the category of practice, this offering of loving service is spontaneous. So the practice of devotional service, sadhana bhakti, can be divided into 2 parts, namely regulative and spontaneous. So in the beginning, then, one may not like getting up early in the morning. One may not like chanting, attending the Bhagavatam class, worshipping the deity, etc. But when one becomes a little more advanced, then one develops one's natural raga, attraction to these activities, and automatically, because of that, one will always be thinking, how can I improve my chanting? How can I improve my reading? How can I improve my deity worship, or whatever my particular service is? But there's Prabhupada's indicating a change in consciousness, specifically a change in one's motivation for doing the activities. It's not necessarily that the activities change, but one's motivation changes from doing things dutifully to doing things out of spontaneity. So then the main difference between the two, Vaidhi and Raganuga sadhana, is that motivation, and also that in Raganuga there is more of an internal meditation going on, whereas Vaidhi is more about the senses, how the senses are engaged. So there's much more to be said about Raganuga Bhakti, but we're not going to go there in this class. Briefly, we can say that Raganuga Bhakti means to follow in the footsteps of the residents of Vrindavan, and to particularly follow one resident who one has become attracted to, in the sense of becoming attracted to their mood of service. So externally, basically they're the same. The difference is simply an internal one. So this processing of sadhana bhakti is abhidaya. It's the third aspect of Vedic knowledge that Lord Krishna explained to Lord Brahma then in the 4 original Bhagavatam verses, which he spoke at the beginning of the creation. This is explained in the 4th verse, the verse we're speaking on today, and is known as abhidaya, the process to attain the confidential essence, rahasya of Srimad Bhagavatam, bhava bhakti, and finally prema bhakti. So in summary, we can quote this verse again from which is quoted in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Kriti sadhya bhavet sadhya bhava sa sadhana bida nitya sadasya bhavasya prakatyam hridi sadhyata. When transcendental devotional service by which love for Krishna is attained is executed by the senses, it is called sadhana bhakti, or the regulative discharge of devotional service. Such devotion eternally exists within the heart of every living entity. The awakening of this eternal devotion is the potentiality of devotional service in practice. Hare Krishna. So we've completed our little study here of the original Bhagavatam in 4 verses. Hopefully it was interesting and helpful. I'm grateful for the opportunity to try to understand this on a deeper level and share it with you all. Does anybody have any questions?
Krishna Mahan Prabhu, with so many rules, can you hear us?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. With so many rules and regulations, the mind resists and thinks that we're losing our freedom to act. How can we overcome that?
So many rules. Like what?
Like waking up early and to clean, to offer bhoga.
So what do you want to do? Wake up late, live in a dirty place, go to McDonald's? Is that what you're saying you want to do? Is that the kind of life you want?
No.
So why not get up early then and clean and offer your food to Krishna? What's the problem? It's very difficult getting up early.
Not really.
Not really. That was Prabhupada's famous saying, what is the difficulty? So Srila Prabhupada explained that, he explains in the Bhagavatam, in the section about Dhruva Maharaj, that devotional service is simultaneously very difficult and very easy. How can that be? How can it be simultaneously very difficult and very easy? He explained that if one is very sincere, it is very easy. And if one is not very sincere, it is very difficult.
Is it because it takes a lot of energy, but then you get the energy back, so it's difficult to put the energy in, but you get it back?
It's difficult if you don't want to do it. Have you ever tried doing something you don't want to do?
Yeah, it's difficult.
It's difficult, isn't it? And what about something that you really do want to do? Is it difficult?
It's slightly easier.
Slightly easier. What's something that you really like doing?
Running.
So is it difficult?
No.
It's easy. So I was explaining at the beginning that because of doing things that are you could say not in our self-interest, and which take us away from Krishna consciousness, we think that we can think, at least at the beginning, that Krishna consciousness is very difficult. But it's simply because we've developed the habit of doing the opposite. It's like if I develop a habit of laziness, like let's say I just turn into a couch potato and just watch movies for 14 hours a day and sleep for the rest of the day and eat all kinds of junk food, and then you come along and you say to me, "Hey Marvan, you don't look so happy there sitting on the couch. Why don't you come for a run? You'll feel a lot better." Right? And I say, "Well, that's the last thing I want to do." And you say, "But why?" And I say, "Well, it's just really difficult." Well, you say, "What do you mean, why is it difficult?" It's like, well, I've been sitting here on the couch for 20 years, watching TV and videos and eating junk food. So I'm not used to doing it, right? I'm just used to being lazy. So for me, it's difficult. But you, because you are practiced at it and you like doing it, it's easy. So if somehow or other you can convince me that it's in my self-interest to get off the couch, and get my running shoes on and get out there, I'll have a different experience, at least gradually. Right? So that's why we have books like Bhagavad Gita, in which Krishna is trying to convince us that sitting on the couch of material existence, just watching the movie of happiness and distress coming and going, and just eating the junk food of sensual gratification and mental speculation, it's not serving us. It's actually doing the opposite. But because we're addicted to it, because we've been doing it for so long, we're habituated to it, we find it a little hard to understand. It's like someone, like I said, I'm sitting on the couch for 20 years and you come along and say to me, "Come running, it's really fun." I'm just sort of scratching my head like, huh? Yeah, what do you mean? So we're a bit like that at the beginning when we read the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says, abandon all varieties of what you think is happiness and do what I say. And we're scratching our head like, huh? What do you mean what I think is happiness? I know what happiness is. Right? We're pretty sure that we know what happiness is, right? And then Krishna comes along and says, you don't know what happiness is. You're living in a dream world. You're out to lunch. So it's a bit of a head scratcher, right, at the beginning. But if we can associate with people that are actually further along the path than us, that are actually practicing seriously what Krishna's talking about, will gradually, in their association, will come to understand it. Just like if you can actually convince me to get off the couch and just hang out with you, gradually I'll start to understand, actually it's better to be healthy than to be just lazy and unhealthy on the couch, you know. And then it'll become easy. Like for you, it's easy running. You like it. So I can also develop that same type of attraction if I hang out with you, right? But I have to have some initial interest in it. Otherwise, why would I even consider it? Does it make some sense?
That makes sense.
Another thing you have to consider is that whether you're actually free or not. Balaram's question, he said, we think we're giving up our freedom. Right? So that begs the question, are we actually free? Of course, that might be a discussion for another time.
Look forward to it.
Yeah, me too. You can consider that even if, for now you can at least consider that even if we think we're free in the ordinary sense, which we're not, but even if we think we are, we're not free from the four major impediments to real happiness. That's birth, old age, disease, and death. Even if you say, I have sexual freedom, I have consumer freedom, I have intellectual freedom, political freedom, economic freedom, even if you say that that's true, although it's probably not, but even if you say it is true, what about freedom from the laws of nature? You don't generally consider that. So in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is trying to broaden our definition of freedom. Just like, you've heard of Nelson Mandela, right? Heard of Nelson Mandela?
Yes.
So Nelson Mandela, he said that there's no such thing as partial freedom. And we would agree that if you're actually free, you have to be free from all the things that bind you. So Krishna's pointing out in the Bhagavad Gita, if you're actually intelligent, you'll understand that although you may have apparently freedom on the material platform, as long as you're free from these four main laws of nature, birth, old age, disease, and death, then you're not actually free. You have to stay in the material world and endure the sufferings of these four big problems. So that's something to consider. Okay?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
One final thing. Accepting restriction is easier, much easier, as well as understanding that you're not free anyway, but when you understand the purpose. Like we've given a couple of times in this class examples of diseased people, right? One was the example of someone that had hepatitis or jaundice, right? Another was Prabhupada gave the example of the psychiatrist curing a man's mental disease. Right? So, if you actually understand that you're diseased and that restrictions are necessary to get cured, you will happily follow the restrictions. If you actually want to get cured, right? The question is, are we diseased? Right? And the second question is, if we are actually diseased, can we enjoy in a diseased condition? So from the perspective of the Bhagavad Gita, we are in a diseased condition in this world, and the symptoms of the disease, as I explained before, are birth, old age, disease, and death. Those are the symptoms of our disease of material existence. We shouldn't have those symptoms. We shouldn't, as pure spirit souls who are eternal, full of bliss and knowledge, have to undergo the process of birth, old age, disease, and death. That is a diseased condition for us. We're eternal. Why should we have to take birth? Why should we have to get old? Why should we have to get sick and die? That's an unnatural condition. It's a diseased condition from the spiritual perspective. So if we can actually understand that, then we can also, hopefully, understand that in order to get cured, just like from an ordinary disease, some restrictions are there. To get cured from the disease of material existence, there are also some restrictions. But those restrictions are there to stop you from increasing the disease. Right? In other words, they're there for your benefit. It's like if you have a certain disease and the doctor says to you, like I came back from India recently and I had a quite a severe sinus infection, cold. So, the doctor told me, not the GP, but my Ayurvedic doctor told me, you have to do this and you can't do that. If you do this, you'll get worse. So don't do that. It's just common sense, right? So you may not necessarily like it, but because you want to get cured, because you understand that I can't actually enjoy in a diseased condition, therefore you're happy to follow the restrictions. And of course, as you follow them, you're not only following the restrictions, you're taking on the positive, right? You're taking the medicine, whatever the doctor's given you, and you're feeling the benefits of getting cured, right? And then, of course, it becomes much easier at that point. You realize, I'm getting well. My nose isn't blocked anymore. I can actually see. I had conjunctivitis, so and if you've ever had that, your eyes get clogged up with all this stuff, Can't see anything. Wake up in the morning, you just can't open your eyes. So as you start, I did this eye wash, this herbal eye wash, and as it started working, I started being able to see again. This is great. But if I don't follow the doctor's instructions, the positive and the negative, I'm just not only am I not going to get better, I'm going to get worse. So those are the two questions to ask. Am I in a diseased condition? And number two, can I enjoy in a diseased condition? Because that is, from the perspective of Bhagavad Gita, that is what material existence is. That is what we call life. Without spiritual knowledge and a spiritual lifestyle, we're trying to enjoy in a diseased condition. And if you want to see how well that goes, you can just read the news. Right? You want to see how much people are enjoying in a diseased condition of material existence? Just take a look at the news every day.
What about personally? How do we internally ask ourselves whether we're in a diseased condition or not?
You need to have some knowledge. Otherwise, you'll just ask yourself that, and the answer will come back, no, you're fine.
Yeah.
So you need to have some knowledge. It's just like...
Yeah, sorry.
It's just like, have you ever suspected that you had some kind of disease but not really known, and then thought, oh, maybe I should go to the doctor and find out?
Sure.
Has that ever happened to you? So you might have had some intuition that, actually, I don't know, I'm kind of not feeling that well, and maybe there's some kind of symptom, like, I don't know, got a little, like for me, I got this in the last few months, I got this growth on the top of my head, and I don't know what it is. I have had something there for my whole life, but it just got really big, and I thought, well, it's not sore or anything, but I don't know, maybe it's a disease, maybe it is something I should be concerned about. So then I have to go to the doctor and ask, or I have to go to someone that actually has some knowledge and find out. Otherwise, I'll never really know. Unless, of course, it is a really bad disease, and then I ended up getting a brain tumour or something, and then yeah, right. So, if you're fortunate, then you'll have some intuition that, I don't really feel quite right in this body. There's a lot of things in life that don't make sense. There's a lot of contradictions in life that really just, I can't understand why they're there. Like, I want to be happy, but I have to suffer distress. I want to be young, but I have to get old. I want to be healthy, but I have to get sick. I want to live, but I have to die. Like, why is life like that? Is there something else? Those are the questions of a fortunate person. So if you have that kind of intuition, you might not know the answers, but then you try and find someone that has the answers. And that's why Krishna speaks Bhagavad Gita, for fortunate people who are whose fortune is manifested in even just some kind of intuition that, I just don't know. I don't know if this is really all there is, Maybe I should be doing something other than just working, buying, consuming, and dying. Maybe there's more to life than that. So for that kind of person, Krishna speaks Bhagavad Gita. So you read, and you'll be able to understand what the disease is, and that there's no question of enjoying in a diseased condition, actually. You can imagine you're enjoying, but that's not real enjoyment. And how to get cured from the disease and actually revive the natural healthy state. In that natural state, just like in the ordinary sense, that's when you can enjoy. Not when you're lying in bed with a fever and your nose and is all blocked up and you're coughing, and how are you going to enjoy in that state? No, you enjoy when you're healthy. So Krishna will explain to you in the Bhagavad Gita the disease state, the healthy state, and how to transition between the two. And he says, Susukam kartum avyayam. This process is always joyfully performed. It's fun, it's enlivening. It's to take the medicine of Bhakti Yoga. It tastes very good. Chanting Hare Krishna, hearing Bhagavad Gita, associating with the Bhakti practitioners, taking prasad, food that's offered to Krishna. It's all very tasty. It's all very nice. Susukam, Krishna says, always joyfully performed. So, don't worry. Okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else have any question today? Okay, thank you for your good company, gentlemen. Hope everybody has a nice time at the Recharge Festival. Unfortunately for me, I will miss your personal association there. But look forward to seeing everybody in the new year, Krishna willing. And yeah, hope you have a great time at the festival. Take advantage of all the wonderful association and classes and kirtans. This is the real life of the living entity, as Srila Prabhupada says. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita ki jai, Giriraj Maharaj ki jai, Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol.